Welcome to the East Coast Hunt, Fish, Hike podcast. This is a short mini episode to show you guys a little of what we've been up to outside recently, and tide you guys over until we get back with full episodes in September. Don't worry, I'm not here alone. I'm still joined by my brother and co-host Mike. How's it going, Mike?
It's going well. Don't let my voice deceive you. Things are going well. I'm a little bit under the weather. We've had a cold that's been kind of running through the family, but things are going well. Things are going well. The temperature is starting to heat up. We're right on the brink of summer vacation, and so as a teacher family, things are starting to gear up, and we're starting to get ready for some outdoor activities. So things are good. Things are good down here in Georgia.
Nice. Yeah, no, things are going pretty good up here too. Also, we're starting to warm up. We actually had a day touch 90 the other day, which is pretty
Wow.
crazy for around here in the month of May, especially when our average temperature has probably been in like the 60s. But yeah, no, that was kind of fun to get outside. So certainly, weather is definitely starting to look up. Before we get into it, just want to do a quick little reminder to you folks to follow us on Instagram. We do have an Instagram handle that is at EC underscore hunt fish hike underscore pod. So make sure you're following us there. Make sure you're rating and reviewing us because that's always a good thing to do to help us out. So yeah, make sure you're doing that and following us along because that's where you're gonna see when new episodes drop and see all the fun new things that we're doing in the outdoors. And that's pretty much what I got for that one. All right. So, what have we been up to? That is ultimately the question here, right? This is what this is going to be about, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the fishing that I've been trying to do recently. Now, generally speaking, I haven't had a lot of time to get out there and go fishing, but I do have a little pond next to my office, which is pretty cool. You know, I can jot over there during like a lunch break. I can get about 30 or 40 minutes worth of fishing in, and then like get back in my car and go back to the office and catch a meeting pretty much right after it, which is certainly an advantage for my everyday life. I don't do that for all that often, but if the mood strikes and it's a particularly slow day at work, I'll sometimes take a fishing lunch break, as I like to call it. But I did get the opportunity to get out to the pond a couple times after the pond had been stocked. So I had waited until the pond was stocked with trout. There's usually a trout stocking that occurs in Massachusetts sometime in the April-May timeframe. I waited for that to happen because I figured that was my best opportunity to catch a trout there. I've been kind of working towards trying to catch a trout in that pond for a little bit and still haven't had any luck. I've caught a whole bunch of bluegill there. I tend to catch mostly bluegill, but haven't had a whole lot of luck catching the trout in that pond, and haven't really been able to figure out why. And so I figured, going right after the stocking event has occurred would give
Yeah.
me really that best opportunity to make that happen. So still looking to try and make that happen. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, and I think that we've got a couple of ponds and little lakes down here that I think are kind of supposed to be getting stocked. I know that I had talked about one trying to go from work, one that's really close to me, and I went there. I had my tackle box, I had my rod, and it was drained. I got there and it was like a puddle. It was a marshland, and it was very discouraging for me. But I've been kind of like doing the same thing and staying up on some of the ponds, and I'm looking forward to some of them getting stocked very soon. But for me, I'm sitting over here wondering, Pat. I know I talk a lot about my wrap shad lure that I use and
Mhm.
some of the bait and stuff that I've been using. But what are you using for bait as you're trying to reel in this trout, and when you're catching that bluegill down or up rather, I guess, in Massachusetts? What are your typical kind of like bait and lure selections?
Yeah, so for the bluegill, I mean, let's say it this way. Most of what I'm using, what I have been using and had success with in the pond has been spinners. So small spinning rigs. They have like a treble hook with like some I don't know, some thread kind of over a feathering over the top of the treble hook, and then a spinner that's on there, right, that spins around as you reel that in at the certain speeds, and that's ultimately what I've had luck with. I have like kind of a yellow one, I have a white one, a few different colors, one that looks kind of like a bumblebee. I've used those to varying degrees of success with the bluegill, and I actually caught one. I mean, it was really small bass on that as well, probably about 5 or 6 inches, which is pretty small for a largemouth.
Yeah.
And then I do also have some trout bait, or some power bait kind of dough or eggs that you would use for trout fishing. And allegedly, according to the internet and everybody else on there, those are supposed to be good for catching stock trout. So you put them on your
Okay.
line, you float them they kind of float a little bit, so you basically send them out, and evidently the trout, because they're stocked, that it looks kind of like the food that they normally eat, and they're supposed to eat this bait, and then you catch them. But I have not had any success with that. But I've tried it, and it goes out there, and I've actually caught a couple bluegill on the trout bait before. They munch on it because they think it's food, because bluegill eat pretty much anything, and I've caught them before, but still haven't caught any trout with it. So the only trout that I have caught have been on spinners, so that's why I generally throw those in the pond, because they tend to work. But the only trout that I've caught have been wild trout. They haven't been stalkers. So it hasn't really, I don't really know what that connection kind of looks like there. So that's kind of where we've been on that front.
Yeah, and so kind of going off of that, so we know a little bit more about like your bait and lure selection here, but what time are you getting out there? Because it strikes me that if you're heading out there in kind of the middle of the day around lunchtime, not exactly opportune time to be catching fish. You're kind of out there in the heat of the day. You said at the jump at the top of this episode that some temperatures are getting up into like the 90s. So I'm just envisioning you there, Pat, going out in the middle of the day in that 90-degree heat. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't happen. I've caught lots of fish during the summer
Mm-hmm.
going out there in like the heat of the day, kind of inexplicably catching some fish in some inopportune times. But what time are you getting out there, and what's that looking like for you when you've been getting out there?
Yeah, usually ultimately, because I'm fishing right kind of during that lunch break time. It's usually, as you said, right in the middle of the day, right around noontime tends to be when I can catch a break for lunch. So that's when I head down there, kind of eat my sandwich while I'm fishing, and kind of fish during the middle of the day. But you are right. I mean, the days I've been out there, it has been decent weather. It's been warmer, which is going to ultimately impact what the fish are doing. They're not going to be quite as active during that time frame, because it's kind of the middle of the day, and there's less opportunity for a catch there. So that's yeah, I think that is ultimately hindering my success a little bit as well, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
But so I did manage to get out 2 times. So the first time I, got out of work, headed to this little pond, made my way over to a little bench, and usually what I'll do is I'll cast kind of into like the shadows. Like there's these big trees that are kind of hanging over, and I've found that the fish like to hang out in like the shadows of these trees. So I'll cast over to where the shadows are forming on the water. Usually I'll use like some sort of either bait, like kind of like that trout bait I was referring to earlier, and set that up on the line kind of while I eat my lunch, and let it kind of just hang out in there, eat relatively quickly, and then start moving into more of a cast and retrieve kind of operation after I've actually eaten some food. So I did that, got the line in the water. I did see some fish swimming around, but I wasn't able to make any connection on anything like that. I think ultimately, from that first time I was out where I was standing, I think the fish could kind of see me from where they were.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes, depending on where you're setting up, the fish actually do have visibility into what you're doing, even on the shore. So I think that they may have seen me before I had the opportunity, because the majority of them I saw swimming away from me, not not swimming
Yes.
towards me. So I don't think we were in a whole lot of luck there. And then the second time I got out there, I managed to walk about halfway around this little lake, and there's like kind of this overhanging tree over there that I was starting to to fish under, and I did see a really good size bass, like largemouth bass. So it wasn't. I mean, for largemouth bass, it really wasn't that big. For this, but for this pond is pretty small. It was probably like about a 10 inch largemouth. So
Yeah.
certainly something that you could catch and be happy with. And I saw it kind of lurking around in the shadows. So I was trying to make my way and do something to make it happen with that guy. I fished the spinner past him. I fished a few other baits past him, but he didn't really seem particularly interested. I dropped the trout bait in front of him, and he kind of wandered over to it and sniffed it, and then kind of went on his merry way. And he was sticking in the area, so nothing I was doing was really spooking him out of there. But at the same time,
Yeah.
nothing I was doing was getting him excited either. So I don't think it wasn't meant to be. It was either it was in the middle of the day, so he wasn't really up for feeding at that point, or it just wasn't the proper bait for the proper time of year. So still no catches to report. I will try and get back out there sometime soon and see what I can do. See if I can catch that bass that's over by that overhanging tree. But for right now, it's been good to get out there, but I haven't really had as much luck as I would like to have seen.
Yeah, you're talking about being able to like see the fish and having visibility of the fish and them having visibility of you, particularly like your shadows
Mm,
when they're cast down there. But that must mean that they're in pretty shallow water. Now, a lot of the kind of like shallow water fishing that I've done and the largemouth that I've caught and when I've been around with my father-in-law when he's been catching some largemouth is from being out in a boat or a kayak or a canoe and casting out towards the shallows,
mm-hmm,
and being able to catch that fish on the line when you're retrieving back towards the lake from when you're in the from when you're fishing into the shallows and when you're fishing onto the shore. Now, largemouth do tend to be pretty territorial, and they do tend to be kind of like edge feeders they tend to kind of like lurk around in in the shallows like that. So I do think that it's probably a largemouth that you're talking about here, especially if it's in that more shallow area. Do you have any idea of what the depth is that you're fishing? And I ask because when I start to think about what it is that might be successful in a particular depth or in a particular kind of terrain or region, I'm starting to wonder if I mean, you're throwing everything that you've got in the tackle box at him, right?
yeah.
Once you know where the fish is, but I just find it so interesting that you might need to kind of mix up your tactics and mix up your lures based on what it is that you're doing in the shallows when you're fishing in the shallows,
Mm-hmm.
based on like different from what I would be doing if I'm in the lake fishing towards those shallows. So,
Yeah.
what's kind of like the depth and the terrain that you're working with there?
Yeah, ultimately the depth is pretty shallow. I mean, the pond itself probably I think gets down to like 20 feet in the middle, but I mean that's like the deepest point, and you can't even really cast that far into that area. Most of the areas that I'm casting or that I'm fishing are less than 5 feet. I would say probably closer
Yeah.
to like 4 feet. In the area where this fish was swimming was probably like 1 or 2 feet. It was like very
Okay.
very shallow, but the water was pretty clear, so you could like kind of see what was going on in there, which was what was pretty exciting about that. So yeah, no, it was pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sitting over here and I just keep thinking about my last trip up to Lake Lanier when I was so impacted by like the depth and the
Hmm.
terrain to the point that like I was trying to rely on my most successful fishing strategies and lures and I wasn't able to do it and I didn't do a really good job of kind of um adapting
Hmm.
to my depth and adapting to my terrain. I ended up catching like I ended up catching like a very small fish one trip up to Lanier, and then another one that I got all the way up to the boat that was a little bit better size. It was probably closer to that like 9 inch or so that got right up to the boat and then
Hmm.
whacked against the boat when I when I was trying to lift it off of the when I was trying to lift it up into the boat. But the yeah, I think I gotta do a little bit of a better job adapting to my terrain like that. So, but
Nice.
you're getting out there, Pat, and that's really an important thing is you're getting out there and the catches will come. But for right now, you're doing what you need to and getting a line in the water.
Yeah, exactly. And that's ultimately the plan, right? Is just try and get out there, try and do more fishing. The more fishing I can do, the more opportunity I'll have to catch something, and the more we can share with you. And that's what it all comes down to, as listeners, is sharing with you guys, sharing with Mike, being able to share these stories. I mean, that's a lot of the fun for us. So that's that's pretty much it. That's all I got so far for fishing. Hopefully, gonna have some more as we move into the summer. Mike, any last parting words before we end this short little mini episode?
Nope, nope. Thanks for listening, guys. Make sure that you hit us up on the social medias, and we'll keep getting out there into your ears.
All right, sounds good. Hope you guys enjoyed this little story of this, well, not particularly successful, but definitely fun tripping fishing adventure from me. But until next time, get outside, have some fun out there. Thanks for listening to the East Coast Hunt Fish Hike podcast. If you have questions, comments, or have an idea for an episode, feel free to follow us and reach out over social media. Don't forget to rate, review, or tell your friends about the podcast. And until you hear from us again, get outside, have some fun out there.